Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvaraja Kacharya Ashtotara Shishim's Divine Grace Abhay Charanadavinda Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Namaste Gaura Premanande, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning for our Scientific Saturday class, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, which is the Hangsa Guhya prayers, and we're studying text 25. Deho, Asavo, Aksha, Manavo, Bhuta, Matram, Deyano Swaksha Manavo Bhuta Matram, Atmanam, Anyam, Cha, Vidu, Parang, Yat, Atmanam, Anyam, Cha, Vidu, Param, Yat, Sarvam, Puman, Veda, Gunangsh, Cha, Tajgyo, Sarvam Puman Veda Gunangsh Cha Tajgyo, Na Veda Sarva Gyam Anantam Ide Na Veda Sarva Gyam Anantam Ide Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram Atmanamanyam Chavidu Parangyat Sarvam Puman Veda Gunang Chatajgyo Naveda Sarva Gyamanantamide Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram Atmanamanyam Chavidu Parangyat Sarvang Puman Veda Gunang Chatajgyo Naveda Sarva Gyamanantamide Govinda.
Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram
Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram
Atmanam Anyam Chavidu Param Yat
Atmanam Anyam Chavidu Parangyat
Sarvam Puman Veda Gunam Chatajgyo
Sarvam Puman Veda Gunang Chatajgyo Naveda Sarvagyam Anantamide
Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram
Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram
Atmanam Anyam Chavidu Paramyat
Atmanam Anyam Chavidu Parangyat
Sarvam Puman Veda Gunam Sataknyo
Sarvam Puman Veda Gunang Chatajgyo
Naveda Sarvagyam Anantamide
Naveda Sarvagyam Anantamide. Ladies? Deho Savoksha Manavo Bhuta Matram Atmanamanyam Chavidu Parangyat Sarvam Puman Veda Gunang Chatajgyo Naveda Sarvagyam Anantamide Okay. Teho savoksha manavo bhuta matram atmanamanyam cha vidu parang yat sarvam puman veda gunang tatajgyo naveda sarvagyam anantamide deha. This body, asava, the life heirs, aksha, the different senses, manava, the mind, understanding, intellect and ego. Understanding, intellect and ego. Bhuta matram, the 5 gross material elements and the sense objects, form, taste, sound and so on. Atmanam, themselves. Anyam, any other. Cha, and. Viduhu, no. Param, beyond. Yat, that which. Sarvam, everything. Puman, the living being. Veda, knows. Gunan, the qualities of the material nature. Cha, and. Tatgya, knowing those things. Na, not. Veda, knows. Sarvagyam, unto the omniscient. Anantam, the unlimited. Ide, I offer my respectful obeisances. Translation. Because they are only matter, the body, the life heirs, the external and internal senses, the 5 gross elements and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of the other senses or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life heirs, the senses, the elements and the sense objects. And he can also know the 3 qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Please repeat. Because they are only matter, the body, the life heirs, the external and internal senses, the 5 gross elements, and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of other senses, or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life heirs, the senses, the elements, and the sense objects. And he can also know the 3 qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Material scientists can make an analytical study of the physical elements, the body, the senses, the sense objects, and even the air that controls the vital force. But still they cannot understand that above all these is the real spirit soul. In other words, the living entity, because of his being a spirit soul, can understand all the material objects. Or when self-realized, he can understand the Paramatma upon whom yogis meditate. Nevertheless, the living being, even if advanced, cannot understand the supreme being, the personality of Godhead, for he is Ananta, unlimited in all six opulences. Before I repeat the verse 25, I'm just going to read the verse 24 because the two kind of fit together. As the sense objects, form, taste, touch, smell and sound, cannot understand how the senses perceive them, so the conditioned soul, although residing in his body along with the supersoul, cannot understand how the supreme spiritual person, the master of the material creation, directs his senses. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that supreme person, who is a supreme controller. Because they are only matter, the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the five gross elements, and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound, and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of other senses, or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life airs, the senses, the elements, and the sense objects. And he can also know the three qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the supreme being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Hare Krishna. So, we're studying this particular verse today because it's part of our Scientific Saturdays, and we are continuing on our discussion on consciousness. Now, this is going to be a tough class, because normally, just by sitting in Srimad Bhagavatam class, you get purified hearing transcendental sound vibration, and even we should be paying attention, but there is great benefit just in hearing that vibration anyway. But today I'm going to be challenging your analysis. I'm going to require you to think very carefully about the one thing you've been doing all your life, being conscious, and what you are conscious of, and how that actually works, and how it probably isn't as simple or as straightforward as you thought, and how when you actually do think about these things, they reveal the message that is given in these verses. That the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the gross elements, these are all, and the subtle objects, they're our main subject today, cannot know their own nature. They're inert. They're not conscious. They're not aware. They exist. They have qualities of their own, but they do not know their own qualities. Whereas it is the spirit soul who is aware of all these different objects. So that is the distinction that has been drawn here, first of all. The distinction we made last time. That when we talk about the soul, we are talking about that entity that is the source of consciousness. And we discussed consciousness in terms of that it is what gives rise to our experience of the world. So that the world, and I'm going to use the words of the philosophers on this one, feels like something. It feels like something to exist. And in the human form, we can actually reflect upon that. Other creatures are conscious, but they can't do the same self-reflection and think of what it means, that fact that I am conscious, I am aware. We went through Jiva Goswami's arguments that help us to distinguish consciousness from the body. Particularly, I am the subject of my experiences. It is I feel, I see, I experience, I love, I want. I. That I is the source of consciousness, the living entity. That's our experience of being an I. That everything is happening to me. And I am the witness of my thoughts, the thoughts of my mind, and the actions of my body. And that again is being referred to here. So what we're going to talk about today is the process by which we are aware of the world. And particularly how we become aware of the subtle sense objects. You've all read in the Bhagavatam many times, subtle sense objects, and wondered, okay, it's form, taste, smell, sound and touch, but what does this actually mean to us? And Prabhupada makes the point here that the scientists try to do an analysis of the material world. And basically they do have a reductionist system where they're trying to understand, if I break down what I think matter is composed of into its little bits, that will explain everything. But when they do that, as we explained last time, they cannot find a source of consciousness. And their problem is even worse. They cannot even find the source of what we experience about the world. Now bear in mind that science is meant to explicate the world. It is meant to explain what the outside world is. But they cannot explain from physics what we experience of the outside world. And that's what I'm going to be taking you through in a few exercises. Think of it like this. This stuff, matter, it's hard, real stuff, right? Now, according to physics, of course, this is made up of atoms and molecules, you know? And atoms are 99.999999 approximately empty space. So if this is all made of 99.999999% empty space, how do you see it? How do I feel it? Can I explain that? No. Of course, you can say, well, it's not 99.999% empty space, it's actually full of quantum field. And what do you see when you look at a quantum field? The only reason we see this, according to them, is that light is bouncing off it. Whatever it is, light's bouncing off it. And that's something we're going to get into. That light is entering your eye and you're seeing stuff. Therefore, you know that there's stuff out there. But what we need to separate what we are experiencing and the qualities that we see out here. Physics can't explain why I should have that particular experience of, say, and I'm going to use color in a moment for to explain this. It cannot explain why I have that from the facts we know about physics. And that is why the Bhagavatam's analysis is different. The Bhagavatam analyzes the world qualitatively. It starts from the point of view that consciousness exists, and starts from the point of view that we need to understand why we're experiencing the world and what we're experiencing about it. It's not an analysis of composition in the way that physics does it. In a few classes' time on Saturdays, we'll look at what this thing about composition is, and you'll realize it's not what they say it is. That physics has no idea what things are made of, only what things are like and what they do, which is the way all analysis is done. But the Vedas break it down that I'm a conscious being, I want to understand how I am experiencing stuff. So what am I experiencing? I'm experiencing forms. Rupa, and Rupa also refers to color. So visually, I'm experiencing Rupa. Audibly, through sound, I'm experiencing Shabda. When I touch stuff, I'm experiencing Sparsha. There is some kind of Sparsha aspect, a Sparsha function, a Sparsha quality coming through when I think I'm touching something. Similarly, I have Ganda when I smell something. I have Rasa when I taste something. And we can break all of these down. But they relate to a very important principle in philosophy of mind called qualia. Now, people think that I'm obsessed with qualia. Because I talk about it at every opportunity I can. Why? Because qualia are the things that destroy the concept that physicalism is true. It destroys the idea that we can explain consciousness according to the brain and to physics. They destroy it. They are known to destroy it. So in physics, qualia represents the hard problem of consciousness. There was one scientific magazine in the UK published a thing about consciousness. It was meant to be a kind of compendium of all the things about consciousness. And it started by saying this. In physics, there are many hard problems. But only one of them gets to be called the hard problem. And that's the qualitative experience of consciousness. The qualitative, what we experience. So here's a first exercise to get you. This is going to be hard. Even with devotees, it's hard to really understand exactly what's going on here and what qualia are and how they relate to the Tanmatras. So I need you to work through this very carefully and open your mind to this one. And we're going to start with a childish exercise, something you might have done in the school. I want you to put your fingers like this, just a little in front of your eyes, and you're looking kind of through them. Move it so that you can actually see there's a little floating finger in front of your eyes, isn't there? And you've got to do it. You know? Right? I need everyone to find that finger, because if you don't find the finger, you won't know what I'm talking about. Have you done it? Please do. Please do. It's really important. You see this floating finger, right? You're having a real experience of that form of Rupa, aren't you? You're experiencing the Rupa of a floating little finger in the middle there. It's a real experience. Little further apart, yeah.
Like this?
Yeah, but just in front of your eyes, so that you're looking through them and you can see that there's a little floating thing in the middle.
No.
Move it closer, further away, just.
No.
You're looking through it. You're not looking at either finger. You're looking past them. You know.
Okay, I see.
You got it. Okay, good. Now, this is the point. You are seeing something. It's a real experience. Where is that little finger? Is it out here? Is it outside of your body? No. It doesn't exist outside of your body. So where does it exist? In your conscious experience, yes. But where is that physically? This is the challenge to the physicists. Where is it? Is it in the eye? No. Because they'll explain it like this. Well, this is stereoscopic vision. Because if I close one eye, it disappears. I can see that finger and I can see this finger here. If I do that, I can now see that finger. You know, it disappears when you close one eye. So they say that explains it. It's just the stereo thing, you know, your eyes mixing it. Wait a minute. The eyes don't mix anything. This eye is receiving light from both, yeah, and that's going in here. It's been turned into electricity by the eye, by the photoreceptors in the retina. Turns every bit of light into an electrical signal and sends it back to the brain. And this one does the same. So there's no mixing by the eye. So now in the brain you've got a little flash of electricity coming from this eye and a little flash of electricity coming from this eye. They swap over the back here. How's that mixed? And where is the picture? You experienced a picture. Your experience has qualities. It had a form, a shape. It had a color. Where does that exist in the brain? Do you see the problem that the physicists now have? That you're experiencing subtle sense objects. Rupa. You're experiencing Rupa directly. It's a real experience you're having. But where is that Rupa? Where does it exist?
Same thing all for dreams, hallucinations.
Yep. They're all experiences within the mind. But they cannot be located either in the outside world, in your eye, in the electricity going to your brain, in your brain. They're not there. So do you see why they're a problem to the biologists and neuroscientists? I'll take a question. Way back in the 1980s, when Sadhaputta came to the UK to work with the Cavendish laboratory, that's where they they found the shape of DNA. So he got a post there for a year working with a guy called Brian Josephson, Nobel laureate, who was interested in consciousness. I remember Sadhaputta explaining this point to me. Very simply, the brain's got electricity, you experience a picture. Why? Why is that? And once you've got that, you can now preach to anyone that consciousness is not a product of the brain. Right? It's simple. Because how can I experience something which doesn't exist in the brain? Now, I'll give you another one. Color. We mentioned color. Now, how does physics explain color?
Light bouncing off the different angles.
Light, okay, but color specifically in relationship to light. What does it say?
The waves are different.
That, color is, light is colored. Isn't that what they say? Different wavelengths are different colors.
And then you just see what, like, the object isn't reflected.
Yes, but yes, it's whatever wavelength is reflected off a surface. So is that accurate? No. Light isn't colored. Light's a bunch of photons. There's no color. There is no color out there. And again, you can show people that color is not related to light. Now this one's, be careful there's a number of people with glasses and things, if you've got any kind of sensitivity in your eyes, don't try this. But you can just put your hands over your eyes and block out all light. Right? And then get used to seeing into the darkness. And then if you just put a little pressure on your eyes, what you'll find is colors starting to appear.
Yeah, I've done it many times.
I know, it's what about it. kiddies things, isn't it? So wait a minute. You are seeing colour, but there's no light involved. Therefore, colour is not specifically a property of light. All that's happening is that the different wavelengths of light spark different cones. The different photoreceptors is rods, which are kind of just intensity of light, and the cones activate according to different wavelengths. So humans generally have got three types of cones. One that fires in the, what is it? I can never remember the figures. Yeah. Blue range, which is around about 450 nanometers per second, or nanometers wavelength. And green is very close to that at 510. That's why some people mix up blue and green as a typical kind of color blindness. And then there's red around the 650 and bigger mark. So when you press your eyes, really all you're doing is, instead of light stimulating the cones, the pressure of the fluid in your eyes is stimulating the cones and sending a message to the brain. But where's the color? There has to be something taking that information and converting it into an experience of rupa. And that is the function of mind, mana. Mind goes out and gathers the subtle sense objects and brings them through the senses back into itself, into the mind. And then they become available for consciousness to be aware of. So everything you are experiencing is purely subtle sense objects, tanmatras, represented in your mind. That's it. You don't actually physically really contact the qualities of the outside world. The mind simply gathers the tanmatras from them and brings them in and generates rupa, rasa, gandha, sparsha, shabda, all these things for you to experience. Another way I like to, with colour, is actually we can pass these things out because the paper's out now. Isaac Newton is credited for doing a lot of work with spectrum and on light, and he was looking at the wavelengths and looking at all the different colours that you have in the visible part of the ultraviolet spectrum, and he's noticed, we got reds over here, and we got oranges and yellows, and blue, green, blue, indigo, violet. Where's magenta? We've got magenta colour, but where's that? Where does magenta go? On the which wavelength is that? And there is no wavelength that represents the colour of magenta, but we all experience it, kind of pinky, rose-coloured, right? And then they say, oh, well, this is a mixture. You get some blue light, you get some red light, shine them on top of each other, and if you turn your paper over, you'll see you've got magenta there. But, it's a mixture of red and blue. Explained. Sorted. Nah.
Hang on, how do you experience it now when it's painted here?
It's a printing, and printing works on a different process because it's a subtractive system rather than a light, which is an additive process. But I printed it there just to show you that you will experience. Yeah, but when you think about the two light sources, red and blue, okay, they're just wavelengths at different they're light at different wavelengths. So they're going into the eye separately. They are stimulating different cones separately. Different signals are being sent to the brain separately. Where's the mixing? You can't mix two wavelengths and get a new wavelength. Doesn't work like that in physics. That's not how you create a new. You can't. There's no mixing in the physics of light. There's no mixing in the eye. There's no mixing in the brain. They say, well, it's mixed in the brain. Where? What is that? And where does the actual color appear in the brain? What in the brain is color? It's got electricity. It doesn't have color. So again, this shows that it is the mind that generates the actual experience of color. It's gathering data from the world, but it is generating the actual experience. And the way it does that is by gathering the tanmatras, the qualities that are invested or inhered within the Mahabhutas. And another time we'll go into a lot more detail on the whole metaphysics of how the tanmatras relate to the Mahabhutas, because that's a whole fascinating subject on its own, which the Bhagavatam gets into. You can tell I really like these kind of... It's so brilliant what the Bhagavatam has got. That's the point. It is absolutely brilliant. It really is an analysis that opens up this subject. And we are so bewildered by our own kind of conscious experiences that we think we know what it is like to experience the world. And we then let the scientists get on with their foolish theories. But as Prabhupada says, they're not going to understand any of these things. They can't, and they cannot understand how consciousness works. All right, what do we do next? Another way of explaining that what's out there and what you experience can be are different, and that is on that sheet. You've got the middle one. If you look at this one here, this is an illusion called Adelson's checkerboard, and you can see two of the squares. One's marked A up here, and the other B there. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Now, are they the same shade of grey? When you look at them on the top, do they look the same?
No.
No. I've done the one on the bottom to show that they are the same. They're absolutely the same shade of grey. Now, think about this. This means that the light from those two squares is identical when it enters your eyes. But your mental experience of it, your actual qualitative conscious experience, is different. So this is an example of where the mind is creating an overlay that is an interpretation of the data, but it is not identical with it. And then, beside that, this third picture here. This is a fun one to do with groups. This is a picture of a dress. As you see, what color are you seeing?
Blue and white and golden. Both, you can see both, I think.
Well, which do you see?
I see
Color where? Just on the dress or?
Yeah, the color of the dress.
It's blue and black. Blue and black.
blue and black. No,
Gold and white houses.
yes.
Hands up, gold and white.
What?
Hands up, black and blue. Oh, that's a bigger split than usual. Honestly, I cannot see black and blue. It's gold and white. I would stake my mortgage on it.
No, but we had one person who saw.
No, I doubt it. I've never met anyone who can see both.
I see both.
Yeah?
See both.
Okay, well that's good. Then self-realized soul.
No, I have to
Black and blue.
go away.
With many, there's things called bistable images. Like the famous one is the duck-rabbit one. or the vase and the faces. You know those? I probably should have put those in. Where you can either see that you're looking at a vase, you know, or you can see you're looking at two faces. And you can switch back and forwards with those. But I've actually never met anyone who can switch back and forward on this one.
Maybe it's my lenses.
I'm not sure. Anyway, well done. So, what we're learning from all of this is that qualia are subjective. They're personal. It's what your mind is feeding you. And you cannot be sure it's the same as what other people are experiencing themselves. Just looking at a red thing, we have the Tulsi cloth around it, the top part of it. I'm seeing that as red. Everyone else is seeing it as red? Now imagine you had to explain your experience of redness, of that redness, to someone who had never seen colour. Could you do it? No. Even if I pointed to that and said, that's what I'm seeing as red, you can never be sure that that's the same redness that we're all experiencing. And that's one of the things that this example with the dress starts to reveal. Of course, for just discussing, if I want something red, you're going to give me something that you think is that colour, and we'll get on fine. So we're able to kind of deal with these things. But qualia are private. They're in your mind, and they're practically impossible for you to explain to anyone else. Now, I've used basically visual because it's an easy one to illustrate. But this works for all the senses. If you think about sound, what do I do with the cartels? Huh? All right. Well, look, if I ding the cartel, basically you've got metal vibrating. Is that sound? Depends what you mean by sound. You know this, if a tree falls in the forest and, is there a sound? Is the best way to phrase it. Is there a sound? Of course, the other trees were upset, and all the birds and insects and creatures that were running around the trees certainly got out of the way. But, in human terms, is there a sound? So sound can either be thought of in terms of physics, which basically means a pressure wave, generally moving in air, but it can move through solids as well, and liquids. So that's...
Is the wave itself the sound, or is it the sound?
No, but they say that's a source of sound. But it's all it is a pressure wave. But is that the sound we experience? No. Sound also has a second meaning, which is the psychological experience of sound. Because think of it like this. The cartel's vibrating, ding-ling-ling, that sets up a thing in the air. It comes to the ear. That moves the eardrum, the tympanic membrane. So that movement of a bit of skin, is that sound? Is that still sound? And then it's moving some 3 little bones. Just moving them back and forwards. Is that sound? Then it puts pressure on a little window within the kind of snail-shaped cochlea of the inner ear. And it's putting pressure on the liquid in there. Is that sound? And then that moves a little cilia, little hairs that are within the cochlea, the inside. The little hairs move. And if they move, they might stimulate an electrical signal. Where's the sound? You can see there's nothing there now. Data. You can say data. Information of some sort is changing its format from a pressure wave to a moving liquid to a moving kind of bones to pressure, and now it's being turned into electrical data being sent into the brain. Where's the sound? Why is that experienced as a sound? Again, qualia. Inexplicable in terms of the biology and neuroscience. When you taste something or smell something, same problem. You know? Smell. Actually, we still don't know how smell works, how the sense of smell works. The basic thing that'll be in the textbooks is what's called lock and key, that a chemical has a particular shape, it fits into a particular receptor, that sends a signal. How is that a smell? How does that experience as a smell? And taste, how is chemicals hitting the tongue turned into flavor that we experience? Touch, same problem. Why does touch feel like something? One of the big ones that's it's a surprise that neuroscientists are very happy to admit they haven't a clue about is pain. Now, you think, wait a minute, but we've got anesthetics, we've got analgesics, you know, we seem to have all the drugs that can deal with knocking out pain, but we've no idea why stimulus from our nerves going into our brain, why that feels like something. Why does that set of electrical activity feel, ow? That is the mystery. So Francis Crick, when he published a book called The Astonishing Hypothesis, this was his, after he dealt with DNA, he thought, I'm going to work on consciousness. I've sorted life out. Now I'm going to sort consciousness out. So he, years, decades of research on neuroscience, he kind of figured out, well, I think consciousness is something what's called neural correlates of consciousness. Correlates, that basically when we study someone saying they are conscious of certain things, we see certain things firing in the brain. Okay? This part of the brain seems to correlate when people feel like this. And that's fine. Of course that's right. We would expect that. And he kind of felt, I've got now an explanation that consciousness is the sharing of data from the front to the back and, amongst a certain set of neural connections. And he wrote this whole book. And it was a big thing in the papers in the early 90s. And I was to do a piece for the BBC when it came out. And so I went and got the original paper, rather than just rely on the news articles, which said, oh, we've discovered the soul. We've explained, we found the soul in the brain, it's all cleared up now. Consciousness is just a brain thing. So we looked up the paper, and practically the first thing that Francis Crick says in the paper is that, of course, we didn't deal with qualia, because he said no one has any explanation for the redness of red or the painfulness of pain. So we can't deal with qualia. But we've got an explanation for consciousness. No, you haven't. Until you can deal with what we actually experience as conscious beings, which is the qualities of the Tanmatras, you haven't got an explanation for consciousness. That's what we pointed out last time in this phrase, unified qualitative subjectivity. That's what has to be explained when anyone wants to talk about consciousness. You can talk about how you can help things with psychology, and you can look at, problems that are there in the brain when this part of the brain isn't functioning. Well, yeah, you can look at all of that. But this has nothing to do with consciousness. This
is that published? Before. When did he publish that work?
That one was 93, I think, 93, 94.
1993.
Yeah, it was quite old. But until today, no one has any explanation of qualia. It is...
Or consciousness.
Or consciousness. No, you're absolutely right. It's getting worse. for them. Getting absolutely worse. We pointed out last time that practically speaking, the theories that are put around now are not that consciousness comes from the brain. Panpsychism is the big deal now in consciousness studies. The idea that consciousness can't be a product, it can't be reduced to physics, therefore maybe it must be something of its own type. Or a quantum thing, because that's mysterious and no one knows anything, what's going on there. Throw it in there as well, yeah, exactly. So what this gets us to, having, the way we deal with the academics and the philosophers and the guys on this one, is to put it like this. Mental states have qualities. And these qualities, qualia, it's not just sensory ones. Actually, all your mental states have qualities. For instance, there's the internal sensations. Hunger. There is something that it is like to feel hungry. Right? The brain may have all sorts of messages coming to it from your tummy, but there is something that it is like to feel hungry. That is distinct, that is qualitative. To feel pain, to feel happy, emotions, to feel fear. There is something like that. These are all qualities. That, so they can be counted as qualia also. And so sensory are accepted. Internal sensations are accepted. Emotions, most people now accept. Thoughts have qualities also. There is something that it is like to get an idea, isn't it? Oh, just remember something. Besides what the memory might bring to you, there is something that it is like to have thoughts. So even that is kind of a qualitative aspect. So mental states have qualities that we cannot explain in physics. That is the simple takeaway, isn't it? That there are qualities that I am experiencing in my mind that I cannot explain by anything in physics, biology, neuroscience, chemistry, whatever. So our point is, mental states belong in a different category of properties. There are different functions at work with the mind than there is with the brain. And you shouldn't conflate them. You've got to keep them separate. And consciousness, being the witness of mental states, is a different category of function and property again. And you cannot reduce that even to mind. Never mind to physics. Therefore, you really need to look at three categories of functions and properties. The brain and body, biology, neuroscience. Like, those are physics stuff. You've got mental states, the mind. That needs to be in its own category of functions and properties. And consciousness is different again. So three categories of functions. And that's why we do this little kind of thing at the bottom here. And we talk about them in terms of functions and properties as it's mentioned here. And you'll see that it pops up again and again in the Bhagavatam. The discussion on functions and properties. And if you keep talking about functions and properties, people can't argue about what they think is the main argument against the soul or against non-neural consciousness. What's it made of? Right? Well, okay, you got the soul, you got mind, what's it made of? Well, of course, ultimately, everything is made of the same stuff that everything else is made of. Brahman, It is Krishna's energies, So, but the material world, even in physics, is only analyzed according to what we see it do, and therefore we give it, we assign properties according to explain what it does. Two things attract. What do we say? That's mass. Mass attracts. Things repel, things move away. We say, oh, that's charge. But what is charge? What is mass? It's a function that moves things away from each other or brings things together. That's all. They're creating kind of categories of properties to explain what they see things